ADHD Organization. Let's talk about it. If you're chronically disorganized but unfamiliar with ADHD, here's a simple definition. Attention deficit hyperactivity disorder is the impairment of executive functioning. And what's executive functioning? It's a set of skills that help you plan, focus, remember things, and get stuff done. Imagine a manager in your head organizing tasks, keeping you on track, and helping you solve problems. It's all about how someone self-manages and self-regulates. Renowned researcher and authority on ADHD, Thomas Brown, shares a model of 6 clusters of executive functioning to better understand it and how it applies to someone's life. They are activation, which includes organizing, prioritizing, and activating work. Focus, which includes focusing, sustaining, and shifting attention to tasks. Effort, which includes regulating alertness, sustaining effort, and processing speed. Emotion, which includes managing frustration and modulating emotions. Memory, which includes using working memory and accessing recall. Action, which includes monitoring and self-regulating action. In today's video, I'll talk about the items highlighted. Before we get into it, please note that because ADHD looks different in just about everyone, I'm sharing what works for me as someone with ADHD who works at maintaining organization in my life on a day-to-day basis. Hello and welcome. I'm Sandy, home organization educator teaching about all things organization. And before I forget, be sure to stick around to the end of this video and I'll share an ADHD organization resource to help. Memory. Memory is a problem for me. I'll walk into a room, forget why I walked into the room, then get distracted from the first task, the reason why I entered the room, and move on to another task prompted by a visual cue right in front of me, like a load of laundry. That's why visual cues help me take action. You've heard out of sight, out of mind, right? This is me to a T. If I don't see it, it's like it doesn't exist for me. There's a term for this. It's called object permanence. Object permanence is the understanding that things still exist even when you can't see, hear, or touch them. But ADHDers like me who struggle with maintaining attention and memory, I tend to forget about things I can't see or interact with directly. The solution is to allow for some visual clutter in my life because I need them as visual cues to help me take action. I would love to be that person that puts everything away in its designated spot, but because of object permanence and I'm also a human, I shoot for the 80-20 rule. You might have heard of it. It's when you aim to do something 80% of the time, leaving 20% for imperfection and just life. So in the kitchen, my counters aren't always clear. Plus, I live with other humans too, so this is how I strike a balance. If you're going to keep things on the counter, this one tip will help make everything look tidier. Corral your stuff. I have a marble tray that helps me make the space look cohesive and tidy. It's also a way I help myself with visual cues. If I have produce that needs to be used before spoiling, I'll put it here as a visual reminder to use it up for the next meal. I also do the same with sponges and cleaning items that I simply won't put away under the kitchen sink. In a perfect world, that might happen, but in the real world, it's gotta be on the counter and accessible to use right away. And side note here, I always cut my sponges in half. Maybe it's because I have small hands, but this works for me and I get to extend the life of my sponges. You can apply the same principle in just about any area of your home. Here's another example. The bathroom counters. I'm not always the best at remembering the daily personal care tasks like skincare or taking vitamins. If this is you too, try using these visual cues with one or both of these 2 options. First, I corral things together on the counter in the same way I do in the kitchen. This bamboo tray is the hub and everything I need daily goes on top. A second option is a turntable like this one. Place your daily items in the different sections and turn to access everything you need. You can keep your daily items front and center so you don't forget them, but also contain them in a way that isn't visually overwhelming or looks too cluttered. Tell me in the comments which option you prefer. If, on the other hand, you don't like visual cues and want absolutely nothing on the counters, I'm this way too sometimes, then here are some other options when storing your items behind closed doors and cabinets. Label everything, whether it's your kids' Legos or planners and journals you've kept over the years. Labeling helps with organization for these reasons. Number one, you see everything at a glance, so you save time in finding what you need. Number two, you know where to put the items back. If you designate a spot for it, then it's easy to return after use, instead of leaving it out without a home. And before you ask about a label maker and a die cutting machine to make the perfect labels, I highly recommend and encourage you to keep it simple here. Labels don't have to be perfect and uniform to be effective. Adopt the least amount of friction here. This is what I often do in a pinch. I use a scratch piece of paper and tape. This is a fast and effective way to label your stuff. When your items are behind closed doors, use clear bins so it's easy to visually scan and see what's inside. It's way faster to open a cabinet and find clear bins that you can visually scan than to open a cabinet and see opaque bins that you can't remember what's what and what's where. Write it down. If it's written down, it's not swirling around in my head, taking up space I need for higher level thinking. In the past, I'd write it down, but I'd write stuff down on a scratch pad or a Post-it. Then I'd lose the Post-it and of course forget the thing I was supposed to remember or do. Then I figured out that I need a notebook to put it in all in one place. This has been a huge help in keeping track of my life, staying organized, and getting stuff done. And if you're chronically disorganized like me, you've made your way through all the calendars and journals over the years. I found there is no perfect system, and I'll even abandon a good system that works just because I get bored with them. What sticks with me now, a system that I've been using for an entire year, is my blank dotted journal. The dots give me structure, and being blank gives me the freedom to be creative and not get constrained to one singular format. This flexibility feels right to me, which is why I've been able to stick with this system for such a long time. Having one spot to document all my tasks for a given day helps me stay on track. With my weekly view, I can assign a weekly priority to stay on track as well. Other tools I use to stay organized is Evernote, which is where I keep all my digital notes, and my phone. Anything I'm required to remember goes into my journal, Evernote, or my phone. Instead of using my brain to store this information, I use these tools, which collectively represent my second brain, to help me keep my life organized. If you want to learn more about the second brain concept, I highly recommend the book Building a Second Brain by Tiago Forte. I also want to mention that yes, there is an overlap and duplicates across my journal, my calendar, and Evernote, but that's okay because I don't want to ever miss anything. Create drop zones. Chronically disorganized people often misplace their wallets, keys, and bags. I used to be the same until I created a drop zone in my home for these frequently used items. This means I've designated one spot for these items, and the first thing I do when I come home from anywhere is to put these items back where they belong. No more being late to anything anymore because I can't find my bag and my keys. So far, I've shared a lot of tips and options for you. If you're thinking these tips sound great, but how do I get into action? I get it. Taking action is a challenge because of executive dysfunction, but here are some tips that might help you get into action. Set a timer for at least 5 minutes to tackle a task relating to organization you don't want to do. You can easily do this on your phone. I set timers all the time, and I heavily rely on them to do life. Start and keep doing the task until the timer is up, and if you feel motivated to continue, keep going past the timer. Another option is a cube timer. This is even less friction than your phone because you don't have to set the time amount. All you do is turn it on and place the cube down for the timer you want. This particular timer has higher time increments, but there are other ones with smaller increments as well. Simply set it down to start and then get to work. When the timer goes off, feel free to stop or keep going. now that you've worked through the resistance of getting started. An ADHD brain seeks dopamine, so give yourself a boost by playing your favorite song. An average song is 3 minutes, so take action on the task for the full length of the song to help you get moving. A fourth option is to pick a number, any number, and tackle a task that number of times. For example, if you're needing help getting into action with picking up things off the floor, choose a number like 7 and pick that number of items off the floor. When you're done with 7, you can stop, but if you feel compelled to do more, go for it. This final idea is one I use almost daily. I make the task a game. For example, if I don't want to fold laundry, I'll turn on my stopwatch just to see how long it takes to fold a basketful. When I do this, I get tunnel vision and I'm 100% focused on the task at hand. I turn into a machine and there's nothing that can distract me from beating my best time the last time I folded laundry. This is just one example of how I hack my ADHD brain. Well, that's it for this video. To recap, here's a quick rundown of what we talked about. ADHD is the impairment of executive functioning, like organization. I recommend relying on visual cues by corralling items in a tidy manner. Always label your items for ease in looking for them, and create less friction by making your bins see-through rather than opaque. Write it down so that you clear the clutter in your brain. Ever since applying the concept of my second brain, my organization has skyrocketed to levels I didn't even know were possible. It's been life-changing. And finally, get into action by applying at least one of these tips shared on the screen. I walk through each one, so go back to this list when you get stuck. And as promised, grab this ADHD resource to learn more about it.